is Les Lanham, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
And good night, Dorothy Kilgallen.
Good night, John. Good night, Tony. Please come again.
I will indeed. Thank you.
Ed Robertson, welcoming you to this week's edition of TV Confidential, radio talk show about television that will welcome back Allison Arngrim and Ellen Geer in our second hour. Allison Arngrim, the actress known around the world as Nellie Olson on Little House on the Prairie. Ellen Geer, daughter of legendary actor Will Geer and the artistic director of Theatricum Botanicum in Topanga Canyon, California. Both Allison and Ellen will talk about holiday-oriented events that are coming up in December here in Southern California. In Allison's case, a huge 3-day cast reunion of Little House on the Prairie in Simi Valley. In Ellen's case, a day-long family-oriented holiday fair at Theatricum Botanicum, followed by a live stage production of the American classic It's a Wonderful Life. Allison Arngrim and Ellen Geer will both join us in our second hour. Be up to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we'll begin our program this week by welcoming back our friend Mark Shaw. Mark Shaw, investigative reporter, former criminal defense attorney, one-time legal analyst for CNN, ESPN, and USA Today, and the Woodward in Bernstein, so to speak, when it comes to the subject of Dorothy Kilgallen. Dorothy Kilgallen, the Pulitzer Prize-nominated newspaper columnist and panelist on What's My Line, who died under mysterious circumstances in November 1965, just as she was about to reveal evidence that would have linked a notorious mob boss in New Orleans named Carlos Marcello with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963. Mark's latest book, Abuse of Power, not only affirms Kilgallen's findings about Marcello, but makes the case that Carlos Marcello was directly involved with the assassination of JFK, the assassination of RFK, Robert Kennedy, in June 1968, and the death of Dorothy Kilgallen herself. Abuse of Power is available right now wherever books are sold. We'll tell you more about it in just a second. Mark Shaw, welcome back to our program.
Oh, thanks. I'm honored to be on your program again, Ed. Thank you so much.
I understand the journey that led you to write Abuse of Power began about a year ago in December 2024. What did you find in December 2024 that led you down this path?
Well, it's also always an adventure for me. When I began writing books when was it? Way back in 1992, my first book about the Mike Tyson trial. And then, I've continued to write books along the way over the last, 8 to 30-some years.
Mm-hmm.
And with each book, there's a journey because in many cases, I didn't even intend to write the book. And that's the case with the new one, Abuse of Power, because, as you know, we've talked about it before. I had gone ahead and written a kind of a series of books. The first one was about Melvin Belli, the lawyer for Jack Ruby,
Mm-hmm.
That I practiced law with in the 1980s in San Francisco, and I wrote a biography of him about Belli and found out about his affiliations with the mafia and all of that. And that led me to wondering about the 1960 election, as many authors have. And I was able to find out that, the Kennedys figured they were going to lose that election. And so they called in some of Joe Kennedy's associates, I guess you could call them, in the underworld, and they helped win Illinois and West Virginia. And JFK became president. So that would have been the end of that for me, because I felt like I had achieved the goal I wanted to make people stop and think about that. But while working on the Melvin Belli book, a close friend of his said to me, well, he knew Dorothy Kilgallen. And I had to say, I don't know who that is. Well, Mark, you got to know about this woman. She was amazing. She was a college dropout. She tried to achieve fame in a man's world. Her father, who was a noted journalist for the New York Evening Journal, was accomplished in the journalism field. In fact, he's the first reporter who exposed the Dachau prison camp in Germany, and she then became an intern at that newspaper and didn't go back to college. And Mark, come on, I mean, she had a column called Voice of Broadway in the New York Journal American, which is the newspaper became, And it was read, back when they read newspapers, by 200,000 people every day with the Hearst Syndicate. She also had a very popular television program that most people remember her best for, and that's What's My Line, which you remember was a CBS show every Sunday night at 10 o'clock live. And the panel, four of them, and Dorothy was kind of the star panel there, they guessed people's unusual occupations. So I said, really? He said, yeah, and then she had a radio show with her husband, listened to by 1 million people every day. And I said, well, why haven't I heard of her? And he said, because she mysteriously died in 1965, and there was no investigation, and so on and so forth. They said she overdosed on drugs, and that was it. And I thought, okay, I got to look into this. So I did, and I was able to find, went to the New York Library first, New York City Library, and then to the Lincoln Center. If people don't know, they have a very interesting collection of material about Kilgallen and other personalities. And so I went to the National Archives, and I started looking into what Dorothy was all about, and wrote The Reporter Knew Too Much, which did very well, and kind of chronicled her life and times, but also the fact that she was a very good friend of John F. Kennedy's. He used to come to her home on East 68th Street. And I want to tell you about an honor that Dorothy got last weekend, but we'll do that later, to play charades, and Jackie would come and all of that. And so they were good friends, and when Jack Kennedy was killed, she was just livid. She had taken her son Kerry to the White House. He made a big fuss over her. And in fact, the first column she wrote after the JFK assassination was to say that John F. Kennedy died, and the person I remember is a tall man stooping over a little boy who brought his letters from his third grade class at the White House when I took him over there. That's the man who died in Dallas. Well, if you know anything about Dorothy Kilgallen, she was a bullhorn when she went after cases. She had covered the Charles Lindbergh baby kidnapping case, the Dr. Sam Shepard case, and people can read more about that on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. But I want to move ahead because she gained a great reputation, and then she landed in Dallas. And I always say this, Ed, because there's so many so-called experts out there who've written all of these books who never had set foot in Dallas. Well, my research is patterned after the journey that Dorothy took. And so when she got to Dallas, she interviewed Jess Curry, the police chief of Dallas, and the first thing he told her was, Dorothy, the shots didn't come from back there at the depository. They came from over by the overpass and the grassy knoll and all of that. She then interviewed a detective that was with Jack Ruby after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald, and was amazed at how calm Ruby was when he found out that Oswald was dead. So she started launching an investigation because that didn't make sense to her. And she wrote a series of columns starting with one, The Oswald File Must Not Close. And then she wrote this series on, and then she was at the Ruby trial. We have photographs in the book of her being at the Ruby trial. And one day she walked up to the railing and looked across at Jack Ruby, and he smiled at her. And we found out later that he knew all about Dorothy, because at the Carousel Club, What's My Line was a regular program every Sunday night. He had a lot of respect for her. And what happened at the Ruby trial changed everything, because she became the only reporter out of 400 to interview Jack Ruby. She did it 3 times during the trial. And she wrote columns about him. But what happened then is that finally she was able, I believe, and I've shown that to be true in the books, after the reporter knew too much, then there was a denial of justice about the Ruby trial transcripts, and then collateral damage, and then fighting for justice, and now this new book. But the key to all of that was that Dorothy was able to talk to Jack Ruby, and he led her to say, listen, you don't need to stay here basically and look into Lyndon Johnson. You don't need to go to Washington, D.C. and look into the industrial complex. You don't need to go to Miami and look at the Cubans. The man you want to look at is Carlos Marcello. And if your listeners aren't familiar with him, he was a very powerful mafia don there. Frank Costello in New York set him up down there. And as 1963 came around, he was the most powerful mafioso in the country. So Dorothy took off, and she went over to New Orleans. And we can talk about Marcel a little bit later, but when she was there, she asked her hairdresser, Mark Sinclair, who was a very close friend of hers, to go with her. She got to Dallas, And she started interviewing people and went to Carlos Marcello's brother's nightclub, and she started to put the pieces together. She connected Marcello with Jack Ruby, with Lee Harvey Oswald, all of that, and then she told him, her hairdresser, listen, I'm going to crack this case wide open, but you go home, you go to New York City, and don't you tell anybody that you were here, and don't ask me any more questions about that. So what happened then with Dorothy is that she stayed there, she interviewed people, she went back to New York City, and then she made some startling admissions. One of them was, she said to Mark Sinclair, listen, I'm receiving death threats. I know that the people that are enemies that don't want me to write about this anymore know now that I'm writing a tell-all book for Random House. And I'm scared now. I bought a gun. I'm afraid for my life and my family. She told the other hairdresser she had, if the wrong people knew what I know about the JFK assassination, it would cost me my life. And so she was in the mode where people have asked me, why didn't she protect herself better? But at that time, the New York Post called her the most powerful female voice in America. Mm-hmm. I think she thought she was infallible, that nobody could ever come after her. But after she was back in New York, she was just there 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it was, and finally, on November 8, 1965, which was 60 years ago, past Saturday.
Program note, our conversation with Mark Shaw was recorded November 13th, 2025.
She was found in her townhouse on East 68th Street at Park Avenue in a bed she never slept in, wearing her eyelashes, hairpiece, and makeup. A book that she'd already read was on her lap. And immediately the officials came, the police and the medical examiner people, and they saw that she had an empty bottle of Seconal on the table, the little table next to the bed, and they basically said, all right, fine, it's another celebrity who was a druggie. Ed, there was no investigation whatsoever. The police came, and, well, first of all, there was a raid on the apartment. We believe it was probably Marcello's people. They took away all of her JFK assassination notes, her manuscript pages she had, and the official verdict that they sent over to the New York media was Dorothy Kilgallen died of an overdose of drugs and alcohol, circumstances undetermined.
Program note, there was noise going on outside the building where I recorded this program at the time we spoke to Mark Shaw. We apologize for the inconvenience.
In the new book, where I've uncovered the fact that basically cover up, and there was no investigation of her. Nobody stood up for her, not her family, not the What's My Line people, not the people at the newspaper, because they all felt, at least they said they did, this was their excuse, I don't like it very much, that they knew she was investigating the JFK assassination, and she was going to name names in her book she was writing for Random House. What they were worried about, they thought the same people who killed JFK would come after them. So she basically just disappeared from view, and I was able then, as I moved forward with my investigation, to put the pieces together and finally write the first book about her, and then the follow-ups have landed in the last few years.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Ed Robertson, thanking you for listening to the TV Confidential podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss our next episode.
Hi, this is Lawrence Fleckerbill, You are listening to TV Confidential.
These are sad days for us, as I'm sure they are for all those who learned about Dorothy Kilgallen's passing last Monday. Dorothy, Arlene, Bennett and I have been together on Sundays for the better part of 16 years. Kitty Carlisle and Steve Allen, who've been kind enough to come and give us moral support tonight, are also, in a way, members of the family. They very often have sat on the panel with us. We considered what we might do to express our sense of loss and to pay tribute to Dorothy in a special way. And in the end, we agreed with her good husband, Dick Colmar, that the best tribute to Dorothy would be to do What's My Line just as it was when she was here. That is what we will try to do.
On the line with us is Mark Shaw. Mark's latest book, Abuse of Power, not only links the deaths of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Dorothy Kilgallen to a notorious mob boss named Carlos Marcello, but, as you're about to hear, makes the case that Marcello used Sirhan Sirhan as a patsy for the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and therefore that Sirhan should receive a new trial in light of these revelations. Abuse of Power, available wherever books are sold, through Post Hill Press as well as Amazon.com. For more, Mark Shaw, markshawbooks.com. Okay, so you just recapped the Kilgallen case for our listeners and the events that led you to write your book on Dorothy, the reporter who knew too much. And your explanation of Kilgallen was an offshoot of a question I'd asked you earlier about what you found in December of 2024 that ultimately led you to write your latest book, Abuse of Power. What was it that you found?
Yeah, what happens here is that I tell my wife every time I write a book, okay, that's it, I'm done. And I was done. I felt like that I had explained what happened with Dorothy, how that was connected to not only JFK's death, but also some of the research I'd done on Marilyn Monroe's death, all of that. So that was enough. But Ed, I'm a curious person just like you, and I'd always been suspicious of the conclusions as to who killed Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. People should remember, this was a fury of terrible, terrible things happening in our country. It started with Maryland's in 1962, JFK 63, Dorothy 65, Malcolm X is somewhere in there, I believe, and then, of course, Robert Kennedy in 1968. So I've always looked, as a former criminal defense attorney, at motive, and I could never figure out the whole situation, just as I never could figure out, as Dorothy couldn't, Oswald alone, I couldn't figure out Sirhan alone. It just made no sense to me that somehow or another this guy had masterminded this assassination of Robert Kennedy. And when I woke up one morning, my best ideas come in the middle of the night, and the word linchpin came to me, which is a big word for me. And I thought to myself, you know what the linchpin is between these deaths, JFK, Dorothy, and Robert Kennedy, and that is Dorothy Kilgallen. Dorothy Kilgallen's life and times and her death. And Marcello, I was able to prove, had used a patsy, just as he used a patsy with Oswald. He'd used a patsy as a really good friend of Dorothy's, who she'd shared her JFK assassination evidence with, who then turned on her. He was compromised by Marcello's thugs and told, look, we need you to set up Dorothy Kilgallen because for death because she's writing this book for Random House that's going to expose Carlos. So I looked around and I tried to figure out, wait a second, can I connect Carlos Marcello somehow or another to Robert Kennedy's death? And the starting point, of course, as you know, was the fact that Marcello hated Bobby Kennedy. And why did he? Because the Kennedys knew they were going to lose the 1960 election, as I talked about before. So they called in some of these mafiosi, Traficante, Giancana, and Marcello was one of them as well. And they helped them win Illinois and West Virginia and win the election. The deal with the devil basically, was that if we help you get in the White House, you'll leave us alone. Mm-hmm. Well, Bobby Kennedy, and I've got the book right in front of me that I always say was the one that that triggered these three deaths. It's called, and it's right in front of me, The Enemy Within. Maybe you're familiar with it. Bobby Kennedy wrote a book about the mafia right after he got in office as an attorney general. And he just blasted them. I mean, he just said things about them that were so... It wasn't so much about what they had done as criminals or anything. I always use this one quote. He wrote, "They have the look. These men have the look of Al Capone's men. They are sleek, often billerless and fat, or lean and cold and hard. They have smooth faces and the cool eyes of gangsters. They wear the same rich clothes, the diamond ring, the jeweled watch, the strong, sickly, sweet-smelling perfume." Well, you can just imagine what those guys in the mafia thought of something like that. And then what did Robert Kennedy do? Even though he was supposed to leave these guys alone, the first thing he did was trick Carlos Marcello illegally when he was going to a immigration office in New Orleans, tricked him to go there, and agents of the immigration department basically kidnapped him. They had a plane ready, and they sent him to the wilds of Central America. And he languished in the jungle there for a few days, almost died, and finally he was able to use some of his power to get an airplane to bring him back. He came back to the United States, and just as he stepped on our shores, Bobby Kennedy had indicted him for racketeering based on some possible bribing of jurors and things like that. So Marcello, a smart guy, and I've been able to prove this through my research, says to himself, "Look, I want to kill that SOB, Bobby, but if I do, Jack Kennedy's going to come after me with everything the government has." So what did he do?
We'll learn the answer to that question on the other side of the break. Mark Shaw is on the line with us. Mark's latest book, Abuse of Power, connects the dots between the assassination of RFK, the assassination of JFK, and the murder of Dorothy Kilgallen. Take a quick time out. Talk some more with Mark Shaw. We come back here on TV Confidential.
Now you can fly anywhere in the world and pay discount prices on your airline tickets. Book a flight today to London, Paris, Madrid, or anywhere else you want to go. And pay a lot less guaranteed. Call the International Travel Department right now at Low Cost Airlines.
800-222-0511. 800-222-0511. Again, that's 800-222-0511.